When a millionaire arrives at his luxury yacht on a grey morning, he's shocked to find a 4-year-old girl sleeping inside the boat. Filled with anger, he demands she leave immediately. But as he gets closer, his heart races. The little one is burning with fever, shaking and visibly ill. Driven by an impulse he doesn't even understand, he decides to help her. What he doesn't imagine is that this girl carries a secret so disturbing that, when discovered, will make the ground disappear beneath his feet and change his life forever. The sun was setting over the horizon when Maxwell Anderson parked his Mercedes at the private marina. His face, marked by deep shadows under his eyes and lines of worry, reflected the strain of a particularly difficult week. The acquisition of the largest supermarket chain in the state had been more complex than anticipated, with resistant shareholders and a hostile press questioning his methods. Now, all he wanted was to retreat to his luxury yacht, where he could finally be alone. The night guard greeted him with a respectful nod as he walked down the pier. The cool autumn wind ruffled his graying hair, and the distinct tang of salt air filled his nostrils. Maxwell adjusted the cashmere coat over his shoulders, feeling the weight of the leather briefcase he carried. Documents he'd need to review over the weekend. At 55, he didn't allow himself a single moment of rest. He walked up the ramp to the Solitude, the name he'd given the yacht in a moment of rare honesty with himself. The 120-foot vessel was his only refuge, the only place. He felt truly at peace. Here, he didn't have to maintain the facade of coldness and control the business world demanded. He could simply be himself, although he wasn't even sure who that man behind the mask was anymore. He punched in the security code and stepped inside. The luxurious interior, decorated in shades of beige and navy blue, was exactly as he had left it the previous Sunday. The crew only came when requested, and he preferred it that way. He dropped the briefcase onto the dining table and loosened his tie, feeling the first signs of relaxation. He went to the bar and poured himself a finger of scotch, sipping the amber liquid while observing the city lights through the panoramic window. It was almost 8 p.m. when he decided to head to the master suite. He needed a hot shower and a few hours of sleep. The hallway was dim, lit only by the soft glow of recessed lighting. He turned the doorknob and pushed the door open, already anticipating the comfort of his king-size bed. The first sign that something was wrong was the abnormal warmth in the room. Maxwell frowned, his hand fumbling along the wall for the light switch. When the light flicked on, his heart nearly stopped. There was someone in his bed, a small child, curled up on the Egyptian cotton sheets, was trembling violently. His first impulse was to back away and call security. How had someone managed to break onto his yacht? Where was the alarm system that had cost a fortune? But before he could reach the phone, a faint moan froze him in place. The child, a girl, who couldn't be more than 4 years old, was burning up with fever. Maxwell approached cautiously. Her small face was flushed and covered in sweat, her brown hair plastered to her forehead. She wore a simple cotton dress, already rumpled and damp. Her small hands clutched a thin blanket tightly, as if seeking protection. "Grandma," she murmured, without opening her eyes. "It hurts." Something strange stirred inside Maxwell's chest, a feeling he hadn't experienced in a long time, something he had buried along with other inconvenient emotions. Compassion? No. It must just be the scotch kicking in. He picked up the phone, his fingers hovering over the keypad. One call and his security team would handle it. The police would be called, the child would be taken to some shelter, and his life would return to normal. But as he looked again at the small figure shivering in his bed, an old, painful memory flashed through his mind like lightning. A young woman crying, begging to be heard while he closed his office door on her. All you care about is money and power. She had screamed, and he had replied, with the coldness that made him famous, "And all you care about are impossible dreams." The girl coughed, a harsh, painful sound that seemed to tear through her small body. Maxwell realized his hands were trembling. As he lowered the phone, he approached the bed again and touched the child's forehead. She was scorching hot. Without a second thought, he wrapped her in the blanket and picked her up. She was terrifyingly light. "I'm taking you to the hospital," he said, more to himself than to her. "It's going to be okay." As he hurried off the yacht, carrying this unexpected burden, Maxwell didn't realize his life was about to change forever. He couldn't imagine that. This sick child, who had mysteriously appeared in his bed, carried secrets he had spent decades trying to forget. The nearest private hospital, Coastal Medical Center, was 20 minutes from the marina. Maxwell drove with one hand on the wheel, his eyes darting between the road and the small body trembling in the passenger seat. He had reclined the seat and improvised a bolster with his own cashmere coat. The girl alternated between moments of unconsciousness and feverish delirium, murmuring words he could barely understand. "Grandma, promise, Angel said." Her voice was as fragile as a butterfly's wing beat. "Big boat, man will help." Maxwell gripped the steering wheel tighter, feeling an anxiety he hadn't experienced in years. Why hadn't he called an ambulance? Why was he, Maxwell Anderson, the man who hadn't driven himself in over a decade, crossing the city in the middle of the night with an unknown child? His secretary would have a fit if she knew. A stronger moan made him press the accelerator. The girl's breathing was becoming increasingly difficult, a frightening wheeze accompanying each inhale. He didn't need to be a doctor to know this was serious. The last time he'd heard a sound like that? No, he couldn't think about that now. Those memories needed to stay locked away where they belonged. When they finally reached the hospital, Maxwell didn't wait for the valet. He parked in a spot reserved for ambulances, scooped the girl into his arms, and ran into the emergency room. The heat radiating from the small body was alarming. "I need help." His voice, accustomed to commanding boardrooms, sounded strangely vulnerable. "She has a high fever." A medical team quickly approached with a gurney. Maxwell hesitated for a moment before letting the girl go. Why was this so hard? She was nothing to him. Probably the daughter of some marina employee who what? Decided to leave a sick child on his private yacht? Nothing made sense. "Are you the father?" a nurse asked, placing a thermometer under the girl's armpit. "No, Maxwell hesitated. How could he explain this situation without sounding completely insane? "I found her on my yacht. She was like this with a fever." The nurse frowned, giving him a suspicious look. "You found a child alone on your yacht?" "Exactly." He straightened his posture, trying to regain his usual authority. "You can verify my identity. I'm Maxwell Anderson. The yacht is registered in my name." "Mr. Anderson?" A doctor approached, her young face marked with concern. "The girl has severe pneumonia. Her temperature is 104 degrees, and her oxygen saturation is very low. We need to admit her immediately. Do you have any information about her? Name, age, parents' contact?" Maxwell shook his head, feeling strangely powerless. He, who always had all the answers, who controlled every aspect of his life and business, was completely lost. "I'll need to call Child Protective Services," the doctor, whose name tag read Dr. Evans, continued. "And the police will have to be notified about—" "No!" The force of his own response surprised him. "I mean, let me try to figure it out first. I have resources. I can hire private investigators. There must be an explanation." Dr. Evans studied him for a moment, as if trying to gauge his intentions. "Do you understand you're taking responsibility here? I can't just—" "I'll pay for everything," Maxwell interrupted, pulling out his platinum card. "The best room, the top specialists. Just give me some time to figure out what's happening." A sharp cry cut through the conversation. The girl had woken up. and was struggling on the gurney as the nurse tried to insert an IV line. Her eyes, a shade of brown that stirred something painful in Maxwell's memory, were wide with fear. "Grandma!" she cried, trying to sit up. "I want my grandma!" Without thinking, Maxwell stepped closer and held her small hand. "Easy, little one. It's going to be okay." The words came out naturally, as if a long dormant part of his being had awakened. "I'll find your grandma." The girl looked at him, tears streaming down her feverish cheeks. "Promise, Uncle from the big boat?" Maxwell felt his heart clench. How? Did she know? What was going on? But when he opened his mouth to ask, the girl closed her eyes, overcome by fever and exhaustion. "We need to take her to the pediatric ICU now," Dr. Evans announced. "Mr. Anderson, I suggest you go home and rest. Leave a contact number at the front desk." But Maxwell couldn't move. He stood frozen in the hallway, watching the gurney disappear through double doors, carrying not just a sick child, but also a mystery that was beginning to dangerously intertwine with his carefully buried past. Maxwell spent the night at the hospital, something he never imagined doing, slumped in an uncomfortable chair in the pediatric ICU waiting area, his Italian suit wrinkled and his tie loosened at his neck. He looked like a shadow of the powerful businessman he used to be. His attempts to sleep were interrupted by disturbing flashbacks, a young woman with brown hair pleading for his attention, doors slamming, harsh words that now weighed like lead on his conscience. At 6 in the morning, his secretary, Patricia, arrived carrying a briefcase with documents and a change of clothes. She found him just as he'd been when he called her the night before, demanding she immediately hire the best private investigator in the city. "Mr. Anderson," Patricia said softly, handing him a cup of coffee. "The investigator has already started. He's checking the marina's security cameras and—" "It's not enough," Maxwell interrupted, his voice hoarse with fatigue. "I need to know everything about this girl. Who is her grandmother? Why did she call me uncle from the big boat? How did they get onto the yacht?" Patricia hesitated, nervously, adjusting her glasses. In 15 years as Maxwell's secretary, she had never seen him so shaken. "Sir, perhaps it would be better to let the police handle this. You have the shareholders meeting on Monday, the acquisition process. Cancel everything." Maxwell stood up abruptly, ignoring the pain in his back. "Cancel all my appointments. This week? But sir, the merger—" "I said cancel everything." His voice echoed in the quiet hallway, causing a passing nurse to glance disapprovingly in his direction. Maxwell took a deep breath, trying to regain control. "Sorry, Patricia, just do as I asked." At that moment, Dr. Evans appeared. Her expression was serious, and Maxwell felt his stomach churn. "Mr. Anderson, could you come to my office?" Dr. Evans's office was small and functional. Maxwell sat rigidly in the offered chair while Patricia waited outside. "The pneumonia is more severe than we initially thought," the doctor began, getting straight to the point. "We found signs that the infection had been present for several days without adequate treatment. Furthermore—" She paused, consulting her notes. "The girl is malnourished and shows signs of chronic anemia." Maxwell felt a wave of nausea. Will she be all right? We're doing everything possible, but I have to be honest. The next 48 hours will be critical." The doctor watched him intently. "Mr. Anderson, I need to know the truth. Do you really have no idea who she is?" "No," he replied, but something in his voice betrayed his uncertainty. Those brown eyes, there was something terribly familiar about them. "She had a few lucid moments during the night," Dr. Evans continued. "She keeps asking for her grandmother and—" She consulted her notes again. "Mentioned something about an angel who said the man from the big boat would help." Maxwell closed, his eyes feeling a sharp pain in his chest. Why did those words affect him so deeply? "Can she have visitors?" he asked, surprising himself. "Briefly and with full protective gear." But Mr. Anderson, Dr. Evans leaned forward. If you're withholding any information about her identity— I'm not hiding anything, he answered quickly, perhaps too quickly. Can I see her now? Minutes later, suited up in a mask, cap and gown, Maxwell entered the ICU room. The sounds of heart monitors and the artificial respirator filled the space. The girl seemed even smaller and more fragile in the hospital bed, surrounded by tubes and machines. He approached cautiously, observing her pale face. Her brown hair had been pulled back, revealing delicate features that stirred painful echoes. In his memory, he sat in the chair beside the bed, feeling completely helpless. "Why do you look so familiar?" he whispered, more to himself than to her. As if in response, the girl's eyes fluttered open slightly. Through the oxygen mask, her lips moved, forming words he couldn't understand. Maxwell leaned closer. "What is it, little one?" "Photo," she murmured, her voice barely audible. "Grandma has— in the book." Before Maxwell could ask more, her eyes closed again. An alarm started beeping, and a nurse hurried into the room. "Sir, you need to leave now. Her saturation is dropping." Maxwell was ushered out of the room, carrying more questions than answers. What photo? What book? And why, with every passing minute, did he feel he was about to discover something that would change his life forever? Outside the PICU, Patricia waited with another cup of coffee and a worried expression. "The investigator called," she said. "He found something on the security cameras, an elderly woman. She'd been watching your yacht for several weeks." The security footage was grainy, but the figure was unmistakable. An elderly woman with grey hair, wearing a worn coat, stopped every day around the same time near the marina. She always sat on a weathered bench from where she had a clear view of Maxwell's yacht. In her hands, she held what looked like a small notebook. She'd sit there for hours, explained Robert Kane, the private investigator, showing more images on his tablet. Security approached her a few times, but she always said she was just resting, since she wasn't causing any trouble. Maxwell watched the images with a growing sense of unease. The elderly woman had something familiar about her features, but the video quality didn't allow for a clear identification. "Did you find out who she is?" Kane hesitated, adjusting his tie. "That's where things get interesting, Mr. Anderson. She lives in a fishing village about 2 miles from here, a very modest area. Her name is Helena Martinez." Martinez. The surname hit Maxwell like a punch to the gut. His hand started to shake and he had to sit down. "Mr. Anderson, are you all right?" "Continue," Maxwell ordered, his voice hoarse. "Well, she lives with her granddaughter in a simple house near the fishing harbor. Neighbors say the girl, Sophia is her name, has been in her care since her mother left about 2 years ago." Kane consulted his notes. "The most worrying detail is that Mrs. Helena hasn't been seen in 3 days. The neighbors are concerned. They say she was sick but refused to go to the hospital." Maxwell closed his eyes, trying to process the information. Martinez. Helena. Martinez. The name echoed in his mind, bringing back memories he had spent decades trying to suppress. "I need to go there," he declared, standing up abruptly. "Now." Mr. Anderson, Patricia, who had been quietly observing the conversation, intervened. "You've been up for over 24 hours. Perhaps it would be better—" I said. "Now." His voice came out louder than intended, causing a passing nurse to glance his way disapprovingly. They were in the PICU waiting area, where Sophia was fighting pneumonia. Kane cleared his throat, uncomfortable. "There's one more thing, sir. We found this on the bench where Mrs. Helena used to sit." He pulled a crumpled envelope from his pocket. It was addressed to you. With trembling hands, Maxwell took the envelope. The handwriting was delicate but firm. Inside, there was only a small piece of paper with a few words written on it. "You promised you'd always protect me." Now's your chance to keep that promise, even 20 years later. The paper slipped from his fingers. Patricia quickly picked it up from the floor, but Maxwell was already moving, walking briskly towards the exit. "Take me to her house," he ordered. Kane, who hurried to keep up. The drive to the fishing village was made in tense silence. Maxwell's driver navigated the black Mercedes through increasingly narrow and dilapidated streets. The smell of fish and salt air intensified as they neared the harbor. Helena's house was a simple two-story structure, its paint peeling, with a small porch. Children's clothes dried on a makeshift clothesline, swaying sadly in the sea breeze. Maxwell climbed the worn steps, feeling every beat of his heart. Kane had managed to get a key from a concerned neighbor. The door opened with a creak. The interior of the house was humble but impeccably clean. Children's toys were organized in a corner of the living room, along with some colorful books. On the wall, a child's drawing depicted what looked like a large boat. "Mrs. Helena's room is upstairs," Kane informed him. Maxwell climbed the stairs as if in a trance. The main bedroom was small, with a single bed and an old dresser. On top of it, several picture frames. He approached, and his heart almost stopped. In one of the photos, a young woman smiled, embracing Helena. She had the same brown eyes as Sophia, the same smile he saw in his nightmares. Ana Martinez, his first and only true love. "Mr. Anderson." Kane's voice seemed to come from far away. "I found something you need to see." The investigator held a photo album, its pages yellowed with time. On the cover, handwritten, was the title, "Memories Time Can't Erase." Maxwell took the album with trembling hands. As he opened it, a loose photo fell to the floor. When he picked it up, his world collapsed. It was him, 20 years younger, holding Anna. And in the next photo, she displayed a pregnant belly, her face radiant with happiness. Maxwell's phone, making him jump. "It was the hospital, Mr. Anderson." Dr. Evans's voice was tense. "Sophia's condition has worsened. You need to come immediately." Maxwell stormed through the hospital corridors like a hurricane, the photo album still clutched in his hands. His face was pale, and beads of sweat trickled down his forehead. Dr. Evans's words on the phone echoed in his mind. She had a respiratory arrest. In the PICU, the scene was chaotic. A team of doctors and nurses surrounded the small bed where Sophia fought for her life. The sound of the machines was deafening, and medical orders were shouted urgently. "Sats down to 70%. Pressures dropping. Prep for intubation." Maxwell watched everything through the glass, feeling more powerless than he ever had in his entire life. All his money, all his power, were useless at that moment. His legs buckled, and he had to lean against the wall to keep from falling. "She's my granddaughter," he whispered to himself, the reality finally settling like a crushing weight in his chest. "My granddaughter." Patricia, who had arrived shortly after him, gripped his arm tightly. "Sir, you need to sit down." But Maxwell couldn't move. His eyes were fixed on the small figure on the bed, on the doctors fighting to keep her alive. The album in his hands felt like it weighed a ton. After what felt like an eternity, Dr. Evans came out of the room. Her face was strained, but there was a slight relief in her expression. "We managed to stabilize her," she said, removing her surgical mask. "But we need to intubate. The infection is very aggressive, and her lungs couldn't manage on their own." Maxwell couldn't finish the sentence. "The next few hours will be crucial." The doctor paused, studying the man before her. The powerful businessman seemed to have aged 10 years in a few hours. "Mr. Anderson, now that she's intubated, visitors will be even more restricted. I suggest you go home. Get some rest." "I can't." His voice came out hoarse, broken. "She's my granddaughter." Dr. Evans blinked, surprised. "How?" With trembling hands, Maxwell opened the photo album. The pages told a story he had tried to bury for 2 decades, photos of him and Anna at various times, dinners, trips, intimate moments of a couple in love. And then, the images that changed. Everything. Anna pregnant, her face radiant with happiness. Between the pages there was a letter. The paper was yellowed, the creases worn from being handled so many times. The date at the top was 20 years ago. Dearest Max, I tried to tell you in person so many times, but you were always too busy with your meetings, your acquisitions, your empire building. So I decided to write this letter, which, like so many others, will probably never reach you. I'm pregnant, 3 months. It's a girl, Max, our daughter. I know you said you weren't ready for a family, that you needed to focus on your career. I know that to you, my dreams of building something together were just the foolish fantasies of a naive girl. But this life growing inside me is real, and unlike you, I can't just ignore it for the sake of business success. Mom says I should forget you, move on. Maybe she's right. After all, you made your priorities very clear in that last argument. Feelings are for the weak, you said. The business world has no room for love. So goodbye, Max. I hope all that power and money you desire so much truly fills the emptiness you carry inside you with love. Yes, still with love. Anna Maxwell closed his eyes, tears streaming down his face, without him bothering to hide them. Through the glass, he could hear the rhythmic sound of the ventilator keeping his granddaughter alive. Where is Helena? Dr. Evans asked softly. The grandmother Sophia keeps calling for. We don't know. Maxwell swallowed hard. She disappeared 3 days ago. She was sick, but at that moment, his phone rang. It was Kane. Mr. Anderson, the investigator's voice was urgent. We found Mrs. Helena. She's at County General. She had a stroke. Maxwell felt the world spin. On one side of the glass, his granddaughter fought for her life. Across town, the woman who had raised his daughter, the daughter he never knew, was also hospitalized. Patricia, his voice came out as a hoarse whisper, arrange for Helena Martinez's transfer here immediately. The best room, the top specialists. Yes, sir. As his secretary moved away to make the necessary calls, Maxwell pressed his hand against the picu glass, watching Sophia's pale face. Forgive me, he murmured. Please, forgive me. The heart monitor continued its steady beep, like a clock marking every second of regret for a lifetime of wrong choices. Helena Martinez's transfer to Coastal Medical Center was like a military operation. Maxwell used all his influence to expedite the process, ignoring protests from doctors and bureaucrats. In less than 2 hours, she was settled in a room on the same floor as the pediatric ICU, just a few doors down from where Sophia fought for her life. The diagnosis was grim. Hemorrhagic stroke, aggravated by days without proper medical attention. Helena had been found unconscious in her home by neighbors who only decided to break down the door when they realized no one had answered for days. The doctor now attending her, Dr. Ramirez, didn't hide his concern. Her condition is delicate, he explained to Maxwell, consulting the scans. Besides the stroke, she has pneumonia and signs of malnutrition. Apparently, she had been neglecting her own health for a long time. Maxwell felt his heart clench even tighter. The doctor's words painted a picture of a woman who had sacrificed everything to care for her granddaughter. His granddaughter, the daughter of the daughter he abandoned. Is she conscious? She drifts in and out, Dr. Ramirez replied. In her lucid moments, she only asks for Sophia. As if on cue, Helena began to stir in the bed. Her eyes opened slowly, disoriented at first, then focused on Maxwell. The recognition in her gaze was immediate and painful. You... Her voice was just a hoarse whisper. Finally. Maxwell approached the bed, his legs trembling. The woman before him was just a shadow of the proud figure he remembered from 20 years ago when she threw him out of her house after his last fight with Anna. Mrs. Martinez, he began, but she cut him off with a weak wave of her hand. "Sophia!" Tears began to stream down her wrinkled face. "My little one. Where is she?" "She's—" Maxwell hesitated, unsure how much to reveal about the girl's condition. "The truth," Helena demanded with surprising strength in her weakened voice. "Always the truth." Maxwell sank into the chair beside the bed. "She's in the ICU. Severe pneumonia. She's intubated." A sob escaped Helena's lips. I tried to take her to the doctor, but I didn't have the money. The community clinic was closed. She got worse every day. Why didn't you contact me sooner?" The question came out harsher than he intended. Why wait until she was dying? Helena finished, her gaze now hard as steel. "How could you help if you didn't even know she existed, if you didn't even want to know about your own daughter?" The words hit Maxwell like slaps. "Anna, where is she?" The silence that followed was deafening. Helena closed her eyes, fresh tears streaming down her face. "My Anna." Her voice choked with pain. She fought so hard, worked 2 jobs throughout. Her pregnancy, finished college, got a good job. She never let your absence defeat her. Maxwell gripped the bedrail so tightly, his knuckles turned white. "Please." "Cancer," Helena said finally. 2 years ago. It was fast, thank God. She didn't suffer much. The world seemed to disappear beneath Maxwell's feet. Anna was dead. The woman he loved, who carried his child, whom he abandoned out of pride and ambition, was dead. Her last words, Helena continued, each word seeming to cost her immense effort, were about you. She said that despite everything, she never stopped loving you. That she hoped one day you would meet Sophia because she had your eyes. A monitor started beeping insistently. Dr. Ramirez and a nurse rushed into the room. "Pressure's rising," the nurse announced. "Irregular heartbeat." "Mrs. Martinez," the doctor called, checking her pupils. "You need to calm down." But Helena grabbed Maxwell's sleeve with surprising strength. "Promise," she gasped. "Promise me you'll take care of her, that you won't abandon her like you did Anna." "I promise," Maxwell replied, tears flowing freely down his face. "I swear on Anna's memory." "The album." Helena struggled to speak. "In the back of the closet, there are more letters, all the letters she wrote to you, our girl's whole life, your daughter's." Her eyes began to close, her hand losing its grip on Maxwell's arm. "Get him out of here," Dr. Ramirez ordered. "I need to stabilize her." Maxwell was pushed out of the room, the sound of monitors and urgent medical voices following him down the hall. He stumbled towards the pediatric ICU observation area, where Sophia remained motionless, connected to tubes and machines. Patricia, who had watched everything in silence, approached with a glass of water. "Kane brought this from Mrs. Helena's. A room," she said softly, handing him an old shoebox. Inside, dozens of envelopes, all addressed to him, organized by date. 20 years of history, 20 years of a life he chose to ignore. The sound of a new emergency in the ICU made him lift his head sharply. Doctors were rushing to Sophia's bedside. The alarm in the ICU was due to another drop in Sophia's oxygen saturation. Maxwell watched helplessly as the medical team worked intensely over his granddaughter's small body. His hands trembled, holding the box of Anna's letters, each envelope weighing like lead on his conscience. "Increase ventilator support." Dr. Evans's voice sounded tense through the glass. "We need more antibiotics." Maxwell let himself fall into a chair, the box balanced on his lap. With trembling fingers, he picked up the first envelope, dated just days after his last argument with Anna. The paper was yellowed, the folds marked by time. "Dearest Max, I had my first ultrasound today. Our baby is the size of a blueberry. The doctor said everything is fine, that the heartbeat is strong. I cried when I heard that sound for the first time. Thump, 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 so fast and determined. Mom was with me. held my hand the whole time. But it should have been you there, Max. It should have been your hand holding mine, your eyes, marveling at that first image of our daughter. I know you said you weren't ready, that a family would interfere with your plans. But how could something so perfect, so full of life, be an obstacle? Still love you, Anna. Tears blurred his vision as he picked up the next letter. Max, I'm 5 months along today. Our little one is getting more active. Kicks like a tiny soccer player, especially at night. Sometimes I put my hand on my belly and imagine it's your hand there, feeling these movements with me. I got a promotion at work. I'm saving every penny for when she's born. Mum says I'm stubborn, that I should sue you, demand child support. But I don't want your money, Max. Never did. I just wanted your love, your presence. Still hoping, Anna. The sound of Sophia's monitors began to stabilize. Maxwell looked up just in time to see Dr. Evans give a thumbs up through the glass. His granddaughter was stable again, though still critical. With trembling hands, he continued reading. Letter after letter, Anna chronicled her pregnancy, the birth of their daughter, whom she named Maria Sophia. Sophia in honor of Maxwell's own grandmother, a detail that made his heart ache even more, and her early years. Max, Sophia took her first steps today. She fell several times but always got back up with a determined smile. She has your stubbornness, you know, and your eyes. I look at her and see you looking back at me. Sometimes she asks about her father. She's still very young, but she already notices that the other kids at daycare have something she doesn't. I tell her her daddy is traveling, working far away. I don't have the heart to tell her he chose an empire of concrete and numbers over our love. Still thinking of you, Anna. A touch on his shoulder startled him. It was Patricia. Sir, there's a social worker here wanting to speak with you. And she hesitated. Your nephew Thomas is on the phone. He saw the news about the girl on the yacht on social media. Maxwell closed his eyes. Thomas, his nephew, and until now sole heir, was the last person he wanted to deal with right now. Tell him I'll call back later. He's quite insistent, sir. Mentioned something about legal questions regarding paternity and... I said later. Maxwell took a deep breath, trying to control himself. Sorry, Patricia. I just need a moment. He turned his attention back to another letter, this one dated just 3 years ago. Dearest Max, the doctor said it's aggressive, that it spread too fast. Mum cries in secret, but tries to stay strong in front of Sophia. I'm not afraid of dying, Max. I'm just afraid of leaving our girl. She's so special, so full of life. She has your entrepreneurial spirit, set up a little lemonade stand last month and convinced all the neighbors to buy from her. But she also has a huge heart, the kind you used to have before you let the business world harden your soul. I always imagined that one day you would find us, that you would meet your daughter, fall in love with her like I fell in love with you all those years ago. Now with time running out, that dream seems increasingly distant, still loving you, even after everything, Anna. A new alarm sounded, but this time it wasn't Sophia's. It was from Helena's room. Maxwell jumped up, the letters tumbling from his lap, scattering across the floor like autumn leaves. Dr. Ramirez ran down the hall, shouting orders. Code Blue, start resuscitation protocol. Maxwell stood paralyzed in the middle of the hallway, caught between the room where Helena fought for her life and the ICU where Sophia breathed through machines. Anna's letters at his feet seemed to scream silent accusations. Patricia began to gather the envelopes but stopped when she saw a photo that had slipped out of one. It was recent, showing Sophia on her last birthday, blowing out candles on a small cake. Behind the photo, Anna's shaky handwriting read, "My greatest masterpiece, our daughter." The sound of chest compressions echoed down the hall, while fresh tears streamed down Maxwell's face. The medical team worked for 20 minutes trying to revive Helena. Maxwell watched through the half-open door, each second marked by the rhythmic sound of chest compressions and the sharp beeps of the monitors. When Dr. Ramirez finally stepped back from the bed, shaking his head in defeat, something inside Maxwell broke. Time of death, 10:47 p.m. The doctor's voice sounded distant, as if from another world. Maxwell stumbled into the room. Helena looked asleep, her face serene despite the violence of the resuscitation. He held her still warm hand, feeling the crushing weight of guilt. "Forgive me," he whispered. "Please forgive me for everything." A nurse gently touched his shoulder. "Mr. Anderson, the social worker is waiting in Dr. Evans's office. It's urgent." The office felt different this time. Besides the doctor and the social worker, a middle-aged woman named Regina Torres. There was a man in an expensive suit whom Maxwell immediately recognized. Martin Walsh, his nephew Thomas's lawyer. "What an unpleasant surprise," Maxwell said, his voice raw with exhaustion and grief. "Mr. Anderson," Regina began, her tone professional yet kind, "we're here to discuss Sophia's situation with Mrs. Martinez's passing. The situation is that my client has serious concerns," Walsh interrupted, adjusting his silk tie. "Mr. Anderson never mentioned having a daughter. There are no records of child support payments, no legal acknowledgement of paternity. And now, conveniently, a child appears on his yacht." Maxwell felt his blood boil. "Are you implying this is some kind of fraud? Thomas is merely protecting his interests," Walsh continued, smooth as velvet. "As the sole legal heir, gentlemen," Regina intervened firmly, "our immediate concern is Sophia's well-being. With her grandmother deceased and her medical condition still critical, we need to establish temporary guardianship." Dr. Evans, who had been silent until then, cleared her throat. "From a medical standpoint, Sophia requires intensive care. If she recovers, she will need constant supervision. And Mr. Anderson, with his demanding schedule and lack of parental experience, would be the best option." Walsh smiled with false concern. "My client is prepared to hire the best caregivers, provide a suitable home." "Your client," Maxwell snarled, standing up, "is only concerned about his inheritance. Sophia is not an asset to be fought over in a business negotiation." "No," Walsh agreed, his smile widening. "She's a child who needs stability. Perhaps we should discuss this with a judge? I'm sure he'd be interested to know how a critically ill girl ended up alone on your yacht." Regina frowned. "Mr. Walsh, are you suggesting negligence on Mrs. Martinez's part?" "I'm suggesting there are many unanswered questions." Walsh opened his briefcase, pulling out some documents. For instance, why did Mr. Anderson never seek out his alleged daughter? Why did Mrs. Helena, if she truly knew who he was, wait so long? And more importantly, where is the DNA test proving this whole story? Maxwell felt the blood drain from his face. Amid the chaos of the last few hours, he hadn't thought to arrange a test. Just then, Patricia hurried into the room. "Mr. Anderson! Sophia!" Everyone jumped to their feet. Through the office window, they could see the intense activity in the PICU. Her saturation dropped drastically, Dr. Evans explained as they rushed down the corridor. Her right lung collapsed. Maxwell stopped before the PICU glass, watching helplessly as the medical team fought to save his granddaughter. The sound of the heart monitor filled the air, each beep like a hammer blow to his heart. "She looks just like her mother," he said softly, his voice choked with emotion. "Same eyes, same determined smile. But the stubbornness..." He gave a sad chuckle, tears streaming down his face. "The stubbornness is mine." Regina watched his reaction intently. Walsh checked his phone, likely already drafting some legal petition. Dr. Evans had entered the ICU to assist. Patricia approached, holding something in her hands. "Found one more thing in Mrs. Helena's box," It was a different envelope, newer, addressed to Sophia. With trembling hands, Maxwell opened it. Anna's handwriting, already shaky from her illness, covered the page. "My little Sophia, if you're reading this, it means you've finally met your grandfather. I know you must be confused, maybe even angry. But I need you to know one thing. Your grandfather isn't a bad man. He just lost his way, let the fear of love become bigger than love itself. I hold a hope in my heart that one day you two will meet. And when that happens, I'm sure he'll see in you what I always saw. The chance to start over, to do things differently, to choose love above all else. Love you forever. Mommy." The sharp sound of an alarm cut through the air. In the ICU, Sophia was going into cardiac arrest. The next few minutes unfolded like a slow-motion nightmare. Maxwell watched, paralyzed, as the medical team fought to bring Sophia back. Each second of flatline on the heart monitor was an eternity of agony, charging to 200. Dr. Evans's voice was firm, professional, clear. Sophia's small body arched with the shock of the defibrillator. Nothing. Up to 250. Clear. Maxwell pressed his forehead against the cool glass of the ICU. Anna's letter was still in his hand, her words echoing in his mind. The chance to start over. Was this the price of his redemption, losing Sophia before he ever truly knew her? "More epinephrine," ordered Dr. Evans. "Continue compressions." Walsh, the lawyer, made notes on his phone, his face a mask of false concern. "This will certainly be relevant to the proceedings," he muttered, just loud enough for Regina, the social worker, to hear. "Shut up." Maxwell's voice came out as a growl. "Shut your damn mouth." 3 minutes passed, 4, 5. The medical team continued working tirelessly, but the monitor held its merciless flatline. "Doctor," a nurse began, her tone suggesting it might be time to stop. "No!" Maxwell yelled, pounding the glass. "Don't give up on her, please." As if answering his desperate plea, a faint beep sounded on the monitor, then another and another. "We have a rhythm," Dr. Evans announced. "Still very unstable, but—" Maxwell dropped to his knees, sobbing. Patricia quickly knelt beside him, holding his shoulders. Regina watched the scene with tear-filled eyes. "Mr. Anderson," she said softly, "we need to talk about the next steps. With Mrs. Helena deceased and Sophia's condition so grave." "She needs stability," Walsh interjected again. "A structured environment with qualified professionals. My client—" "Your client," Maxwell stood up slowly, his voice low and dangerous, "can take his inheritance and shove." "Gentlemen," Regina cut in firmly. "This isn't helping." Maxwell took a deep breath, trying to compose himself. Through the glass, he watched the medical team stabilizing Sophia, his granddaughter, his daughter's daughter, the last link to Anna. "Patricia," he called without taking his eyes off Sophia. "Call Daniel Chen." "The private investigator?" Patricia asked, confused. "No, the DNA specialist. Tell him I need an urgent paternity test, and then call James Sullivan." Walsh raised an eyebrow. "The district attorney?" "No," Maxwell turned, facing the lawyer. "Judge James Sullivan, my college friend. Explain the situation, Patricia. Tell him I need an emergency hearing for temporary guardianship. Now." "You can't," Walsh began, but Maxwell cut him off. "I can, and I will. This girl is my granddaughter, and I'll prove it. But more importantly, she needs family. The last thing Anna wrote was about hope, about starting over. I won't let this turn into an inheritance dispute." Regina cleared her throat. "Mr. Anderson, I must advise you, even with a positive DNA test, other factors need consideration. Your age, your work schedule, then I'll change my schedule," Maxwell declared, his voice firm. "I'll retire if I have to, sell the company. I don't care. I already lost Anna because of my pride and ambition. I won't lose Sophia too." At that moment, Dr. Evans emerged from the ICU, removing her surgical mask. Her face was exhausted, but there was a different light in her eyes. "Her saturation is improving," she announced. "It's too early to celebrate, but she's fighting. She's a very strong little girl." "Like her mother," Maxwell whispered. "Like her grandmother." Patricia returned, her face bright. "Mr. Anderson, Dr. Chen is on his way to collect the samples, and Judge Sullivan," she cast a triumphant glance at Walsh, "has agreed to hold an emergency hearing tomorrow at 9 a.m. Walsh adjusted his tie, visibly uncomfortable. "This is irregular. My client—" "Your client," Maxwell cut him off, "can wait his turn like everyone else. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need a moment alone with my granddaughter." He entered the ICU, properly gowned and masked, approaching Sophia's bed. Her small face was pale, but a soft color was returning to her cheeks. He sat beside her, taking her tiny hand in his. "Hi, little one," he whispered. "It's me, your grandfather. I know I made a lot of mistakes, hurt people I should have protected. But I promise it will be different with you. I'll get it right this time. I just need you to keep fighting. Please, Sophia, keep fighting." As if in response, her fingers twitched slightly within his. The night in the hospital dragged on with agonizing slowness. Maxwell didn't leave Sophia's side, dividing his time between the ICU and the hallway, where he occasionally consulted Anna's letters. Every word he read was a fresh stab to his heart, revealing a lifetime of lost moments. Around 4 in the morning, Patricia quietly entered the hallway, carrying a thick folder. Her face showed clear signs of exhaustion, but her eyes were alert. "We found more things at Mrs. Helena's house," she said softly, handing the folder to Maxwell. "These are Sophia's school records, photographs, medical reports, and this." She held out a small, faded blue notebook. On the first page, Anna's delicate handwriting identified it. "Pregnancy Journal." "I can't read anymore," Maxwell confessed, his voice hoarse. "Every word from her, every moment I missed." "Sir?" Patricia hesitated, a rare occurrence in their many years working together. "There's something else you need to know. Thomas is giving interviews." Maxwell closed his eyes, feeling a wave of nausea. What kind of interviews?" He's suggesting Mrs. Helena planned all this, that she deliberately put Sophia at risk to force a financial settlement. Social media is complicated." As if to confirm her words, Maxwell's phone buzzed with a notification. It was a message from his head of public relations. "Need an urgent statement. Company stock dropped 3% in pre-market Asian trading." "Damn kid," Maxwell muttered, deleting the message. He has no idea. He was interrupted by the sound of hurried footsteps. Dr. Evans was coming down the hall, accompanied by another doctor Maxwell didn't recognize. "Mr. Anderson," she called, her tone urgent, "we need to talk." The other doctor introduced himself as Dr. Mendez, a specialist in pediatric pulmonology. His face was grave. "The infection isn't responding to the antibiotics as we'd hoped," he explained, showing some X-ray images. "The right lung remains severely compromised, and we're seeing signs that the left is also being affected." "What does that mean?" Maxwell asked, though he dreaded the answer. "It means we need to try a more aggressive treatment," Dr. Evans replied. "But it's experimental and expensive, very expensive." "Money is not an issue. It's not just about money," Dr. Mendez continued. "The treatment carries risks, and we need authorization from a legal guardian." Maxwell felt his heart clench. "But I'm still not—" "Exactly," Dr. Evans completed softly. "Without legal guardianship, we can't proceed. And from what I understand, the hearing isn't until 9 a.m. "How much time does she have?" The doctors exchanged worried glances. It was Dr. Evans who answered. "Under current conditions, maybe a few hours. Maxwell shot up, grabbing his phone. "Patricia, wake Judge Sullivan. I don't care if it's the middle of the night. Tell him it's a matter of life and death." While his secretary made the call, Maxwell returned to the ICU. Sophia was paler than ever, her small body struggling to breathe even with all the help from the machines. He pressed his hand against the glass as if he could reach her through it. "You have to hold on, little one," he whispered. "Just a few more hours, please." The sound of heels in the corridor announced the arrival of Regina, the social worker. Her usually professional face showed signs of genuine concern. "Judge Sullivan has agreed to an emergency video conference hearing," she informed him. "But Thomas and his lawyer have also been notified. They have the right to participate." As if on cue, Dr. Chen, the DNA specialist, arrived carrying his equipment. "I can have a preliminary result in 2 hours," he announced. "It won't be the full test, but it will be enough to establish kinship with high probability." Patricia returned with more news. "The funeral home is awaiting instructions regarding Mrs. Helena." Maxwell felt the weight of the world on his shoulders. So many decisions, so many responsibilities, and his granddaughter fighting for her life just a few feet away. "Take care of the funeral," he instructed Patricia. "The best casket, the best flowers. She deserves—" His voice broke. Helena had cared for his daughter, raised his granddaughter, preserved all those memories he rejected. And now she was dead, unable to see the end of this story. A new alarm sounded in the ICU. Sophia's saturation was dropping again. "Dr. Chen," Maxwell called, his voice trembling. "Start the test. Regina, set up the video conference." "Patricia, already contacting our legal team," she confirmed. Through the glass, Maxwell watched the medical team adjusting the machines, fighting to keep his granddaughter alive. In a few hours, the sun would rise over the city, bringing with it a hearing that would decide not only Sophia's guardianship, but her very survival. "Just a little longer, my love," he whispered, a tear rolling down his face. "Just a little longer." The hospital conference room had been transformed into a makeshift courtroom. At 6:30 a.m., the video conference screen showed Judge Sullivan's serious face, still in his pajamas, but with his usual professional gravity. In other windows appeared Thomas, his lawyer Walsh, and a newly assigned assistant district attorney for the case. Maxwell sat rigidly in his chair, trying to maintain composure despite the last 48 hours without sleep. Regina, the social worker, sat beside him, organizing a stack of documents. Patricia stood near the door, dividing her attention between the meeting and her tablet, where she received constant updates on Sophia's condition. "Considering the emergency nature of this hearing," Judge Sullivan began, "let's get straight to the point. Dr. Chen, please present your preliminary findings." The DNA specialist cleared his throat, adjusting his glasses. "The tests indicate a probability exceeding 99.9% of a grandparent-grandchild relationship between Mr. Anderson and the minor Sofia Martinez." Thomas let out a bitter laugh through the screen. "Of course they do. How much did you pay for that result, Uncle?" "Mr. Anderson, Jr., the judge warned sternly, "one more interruption and you will be removed from this hearing." Dr. Evans, who had just entered the room, approached the microphone. "Your Honor, we need an urgent decision. The patient's condition is critical, and the experimental treatment—" "How convenient," Walsh interrupted, his smarmy smile visible even through the screen. "The child mysteriously appears on the yacht, the grandmother dies, and now we need an extremely expensive experimental treatment, all perfectly orchestrated to—" "Shut up!" Maxwell exploded, slamming his fist on the table. "You didn't know Helena. You didn't know Anna. You have no idea what they went through. What—" "Order!" Judge Sullivan raised his voice. "Mr. Walsh, your insinuations are serious and unfounded. Dr. Chen is a respected professional, and the test results are conclusive. Dr. Evans, please explain the medical situation." The doctor detailed Sophia's critical condition and the need for The new treatment. As she spoke, Patricia slid a note to Maxwell. Sats dropping again, team standing by. Maxwell felt his heart clench. Every minute lost in this argument was a minute less for his granddaughter. Your Honor, Regina intervened, her voice calm but firm. I would like to present some documents found at Mrs. Helena Martinez's residence. She began sharing images of Anna's letters, the diary and the photographs on the screen. It's clear there was no attempt at extortion or fraud. On the contrary, Mrs. Helena kept this story secret for years, only reaching out to Mr. Anderson when she got desperate for money, Thomas completed venomously. When she was dying, Maxwell corrected, his voice choked. When she realized Sophia would be left alone in the world. Judge Sullivan studied the documents intently. These letters, are they all addressed to Mr. Anderson? Yes, Your Honor. Anna, my daughter, wrote to me for 20 years. Letters I never received because Maxwell swallowed hard, because I was too proud, too blind to see what truly mattered. And now we're supposed to believe in your sudden transformation, Walsh questioned. A man known for his ruthlessness, in business, who abandoned his own pregnant daughter, would be the best guardian for a child. No, Maxwell replied, surprising everyone. I'm not the best guardian. I'm a flawed man who made unforgivable mistakes, but I'm the only family Sophia has left. And unlike your client, I'm not thinking about inheritance or money. I'm thinking about the last thing Anna wrote to her daughter. He picked up the final letter, the one addressed to Sophia, and began to read aloud. His voice trembled with each word, tears streaming freely down his face. Your grandfather isn't a bad man. He just lost his way. At that moment, Patricia let out a small cry. On her tablet, an urgent message from the PICU flashed in red. Dr. Evans was already on her feet. Your Honor, we don't have any more time. Sophia is going into respiratory collapse. Judge Sullivan straightened in his chair. Given the evidence presented and the urgency of the medical situation, I grant temporary guardianship of Sophia Martinez to Mr. Maxwell Anderson, under the supervision of social worker Regina Torres. A court order will be issued within minutes. This is absurd, Thomas protested. We'll appeal. But Maxwell was already out of the room, running towards the PICU, where another battle for his granddaughter's life was just beginning. The experimental treatment began immediately after the court's decision. Maxwell watched through the PICU glass as the medical team administered the new medication, his hands tightly gripping the rosary he had found among Helena's belongings. He had never been a religious man, but at that moment he clung to any hope. It's a combination of antivirals and immunomodulators, explained Dr. Evans, her face showing the fatigue of so many hours on duty. Developed specifically for severe cases of resistant pneumonia. But her body is very weak. The fever, the malnutrition, the stress from the recent cardiac arrests, all of it has compromised her defenses. Maxwell leaned his forehead against the cool glass. On the other side, Sophia seemed even smaller, even more fragile, connected to so many tubes and monitors. Her little face was so pale it almost blended into the white hospital sheets. What we found at the house, Patricia spoke softly, approaching, with a folder, helps explain the situation. The medical bills, pharmacy receipts. Helena had been sick for months, but she spent all her money on Sophia's medicine. When she herself got worse, she chose to save her granddaughter. Maxwell completed, his voice thick with emotion. While I was accumulating millions, she had to choose between buying her own medicine or Sophia's. Regina, who had just arrived from the conference room, cleared her throat discreetly. Mr. Anderson, there's something you need to see. She held out a crumpled piece of paper found at the bottom of Helena's purse. It was a newspaper clipping about Maxwell's business expansion in the port area. She had been watching you for months, Regina continued, not just at the yacht, but through the news. According to neighbors, she always said she was waiting for the right moment. The right moment for what? For this. Regina showed a small notebook, the last entry dated 3 days prior. Helena's handwriting, already shaky, read, "The doctor says the stroke is inevitable. I can feel my body failing, but I can't leave without securing Sophia's future. Maxwell Anderson is no longer the scared young man who abandoned my Anna. I've seen how he looks at the sea every night on his yacht, the loneliness in his eyes. I've seen the news about his donations to children's hospitals, even though he tries to keep it quiet. Maybe the man my daughter fell in love with still exists inside him. Sophia looks so much like Anna. When he sees her, when he looks into her eyes, he'll have to remember, he'll have to feel. God forgive me for what I'm about to do, but I have no choice. Sophia can't be left alone in the world." Maxwell closed his eyes, tears streaming down his face. Helena had planned it, yes, but not for money or revenge. Out of love, out of desperation. For Sophia, an alarm sounded in the PICU. The fever was rising. "Again, she's fighting the medication," Dr. Evans explained, rushing into the room. "Her body is reacting." The next few hours were an emotional roller coaster. The fever spiked and dropped. Oxygen saturation fluctuated dangerously. Each beep from the monitors, a fresh torture. Maxwell didn't leave the hallway, even when Patricia tried to convince him to rest. "I can't," he replied, his eyes fixed on his granddaughter. "I can't leave her alone. Not again." Around noon, a nurse came running with new lab results. Dr. Evans studied them for long minutes, her face unreadable. "Well?" Maxwell barely recognized his own voice. "The infection," she began, readjusting her glasses. "It seems to be responding. Slowly, but..." Maxwell staggered, his legs giving way. Patricia quickly brought a chair. "Does that mean..." "It means she's strong," the doctor smiled faintly. "Like her mother, like her grandmother." At that moment, as if responding to the doctor's words, Sophia moved her hand slightly. Her fingers, previously limp, curled gently. "That's right, little one," Maxwell whispered, pressing his hand against the glass. "Keep fighting. Please, keep fighting." Patricia gently touched his shoulder. "Sir, Mrs. Helena's funeral is in 2 hours." Reality hit him like a blow. Helena, the funeral. How could he leave Sophia? How could he not go? "Go," Regina said kindly. "I'll stay with her. It's the least I can do." Maxwell looked one more time at his granddaughter, at the monitors that now showed signs of improvement, however tentative. "I'll be right back, my love," he promised. "I'm just going to thank your grandma for everything." As he turned to leave, he noticed something different on Sophia's face. Despite the breathing tube, despite the paleness and fever, there was a faint, almost imperceptible smile on her lips. Helena Martinez's funeral was simple but dignified. The small chapel was filled with residents from the fishing village, humble, people who had known her and Sophia over the years. Maxwell, in his expensive suit and devastated expression, felt like an intruder in that atmosphere of genuine mourning. An elderly woman approached him after the service, her calloused hands holding a small package. "Mrs. Helena wanted you to have this," she said, handing him the bundle. "She kept it for years, said it was for the right time." Inside the wrapping was a worn wooden box. Maxwell opened it with trembling hands. It was a collection of small treasures. Henna's first baby shoe, a lock of her baby hair, her first school picture, and tucked alongside a recent note from Helena. "If you're reading this, it means you finally met Sophia and I'm no longer here. I hold no grudge against you, Maxwell. Life is too short for that. Anna didn't either. She always said you had. And kindness inside you, you just lost your way. Sophia is your second chance, don't waste it." Maxwell clutched the box to his chest, silent tears streaming down his face. Around him, The locals shared stories about Helena and Sophia, how they helped at community festivals, how little Sophia always had a smile for everyone, how Helena never let hardship destroy her dignity. She sold cakes, a young mother recounted, bouncing a baby. Even when she was sick, she made the best cakes around to pay for Sophia's medicine. And the girl, added an old fisherman, always helped deliver them. Said she was going to be a businesswoman someday, just like the grandfather she hadn't met yet. Each story was a fresh stab to Maxwell's heart. So much time lost, so many moments, wasted on pride and ambition. His phone vibrated. It was Patricia. "Mr. Anderson," her voice was different, almost cheerful. "Sophia, she's breathing on her own." Maxwell nearly dropped the phone. "What do you mean?" "Dr. Evans just removed the tube. Her saturation is stable. The fever is down considerably. She's asking for you." The world seemed to stop for a moment. Maxwell looked at Helena's casket, at the photo of her smiling serenely on the makeshift altar. "Tell her I'm coming," he replied, his voice thick with emotion. "Tell her Grandpa is on his way." Before leaving the chapel, Maxwell did something he hadn't done in decades. He knelt and prayed. He thanked Helena, asked Anna for forgiveness, and promised them both he would do things differently this time. At the hospital, the atmosphere in the PICU was completely transformed. The frightening machines had given way to simpler monitors, and Sophia, though still pale and weak, was sitting up in bed, propped against pillows. "Uncle from the big boat," she whispered when she saw him, her voice hoarse from the intubation. "Grandma said you would come." Maxwell approached slowly, his heart beating so hard it felt like it might explode. "Hi, little one," he managed to say, sitting on the edge of the bed. "Actually, I'm your grandpa." Sophia studied him with those eyes, Anna's eyes, for a long moment. "I know," she said finally. "Grandma Helena always showed me your picture. Said one day you would find me." "Forgive me," Maxwell whispered, holding her small hand, "for taking so long." Sophia tilted her head thoughtfully. "Grandma said sometimes big people take a long time to learn things kids already know." "And what do kids already know?" "That love is more important than money," she replied simply. "That family is more important than work." Maxwell felt the tears return with force. How could this small child, in her innocent wisdom, express so clearly what he had taken a lifetime to learn? Dr. Evans entered the room, smiling as she saw the scene. "She's responding extraordinarily well to the treatment. She'll still need care, of course, but—" "Can I go to the big boat?" Sophia interrupted, her eyes shining with hope. "Not yet, sweetie." The doctor laughed softly. "But soon. Your grandpa is getting everything ready, isn't he?" Maxwell nodded. In fact, Patricia had already mobilized an entire team to transform the yacht. The guest suite was being converted into a child-friendly space, complete with all the medical recommendations for Sophia's recovery. "Is Grandma Helena coming too?" Sophia asked innocently. The silence that followed was heavy. Maxwell held her hand tighter. "Sophia, we need to talk about Grandma Helena. She's with your mommy now, in heaven." The little girl's eyes filled with tears. "She promised she wouldn't leave me." "She didn't leave you," Maxwell answered softly. "She made sure you wouldn't be alone. She brought me to you." Sophia sniffled, tears rolling down her small face. "Promise you won't leave too." Maxwell picked up the small wooden box Helena had left for him, showing Sophia her mother's little treasures. "I promise, my love, I'm never leaving again. Never." The following days brought a series of changes to Maxwell Anderson's life. For the first time in 30 years, he didn't attend a single board meeting. His office, once his second home, remained closed. His days were now divided between the hospital and preparing for Sophia's arrival. "Are you sure about this, sir?" Patricia asked, showing him the resignation papers from the company presidency. "You built all this over decades and lost what truly mattered in the process," Maxwell replied, signing the documents without hesitation. Thomas can have the company. Just maintain my shares to secure Sophia's future. In the PICU, now converted into a private room, Sophia regained her strength day by day. The paleness gave way to a healthy flush, and her smile, Anna's smile, brightened the room more and more often. "Tell me more about Mommy," she'd ask every night, nestled among pillows. Maxwell had become a constant presence in her room, sleeping in the armchair beside her bed. On this particular night, he held Anna's pregnancy journal, reading carefully, chosen excerpts so as not to hurt the little girl's heart further. "Your mom loved music," he recounted, showing a photo where a pregnant Anna sat at a piano. "She played for you every night, even when you were still in her belly." "I know how to play Happy Birthday," Sophia commented proudly. "Grandma Helena taught me on the church piano." Maxwell made a mental note to add a piano to the list of changes on the yacht. In fact, the vessel was undergoing a complete transformation. The upper deck, once an entertainment space for business meetings, was being converted into a children's play area with every possible safety measure. Regina, the social worker, made regular visits to monitor the adjustment. That afternoon, she watched the interactions between grandfather and granddaughter with approval. "It's remarkable," she commented to Dr. Evans. "I've never seen such a complete transformation in someone." The doctor smiled, nodding. "The power of a child's love. And speaking of transformations," she held up Sophia's latest test results. "Her recovery is surprising even our team." In the room, Sophia showed Maxwell her drawings, a new activity she adored. On the sheet of paper, a large, colorful boat floated under a sky full of stars. "It's our new home," she explained. "And look," she pointed to 3 figures on the boat's deck. "That's Grandma Helena, that's Mommy, and that's the angel, Grandma, who said would help us." Maxwell felt his throat tighten. "Sophia, do you remember what Grandma said about the angel?" The girl frowned, concentrating. "She said there was a special angel looking after us, that when she got really sick, the angel told her to take me to the big boat, that the sad man who lived there would take care of me." A fresh wave of emotion hit Maxwell. Helena, in her final lucid moments, had turned a desperate situation into a story of hope for her granddaughter. "And you weren't scared?" he asked softly. "Being on the boat alone?" Sophia shook her head. "Grandma said I wouldn't be alone, that the angel would stay with me until you arrived." She smiled, that smile so like Anna's. And she was right. Patricia entered the room silently, carrying another box found at Helena's house. Inside was a scrapbook, all the news articles about Maxwell that Helena had saved over the years. "She never lost hope," Patricia commented, showing headlines about anonymous donations Maxwell had made to children's hospitals. "Even when you tried to hide your more human side, she saw it." "So much time wasted," Maxwell murmured, running his fingers over an old photo where he appeared young, smiling beside Anna. "It's not wasted," Sophia said suddenly, her voice sleepy. "Grandma said sometimes we have to get lost before we can find ourselves again." Maxwell kissed her forehead gently. "Your grandma was a very wise woman. She also said you'd cry a lot when you found me," Sophia continued, her eyes beginning to close. "But it would be a good cry, like washing your heart clean." The tears came instantly, confirming Helena's wisdom once again. Maxwell held his granddaughter's, small hand watching her drift off to sleep. "Mr. Anderson," Dr. Evans called softly from the doorway, "the latest tests are back. If everything continues like this, she can be discharged in 2 days. Is the yacht ready?" he asked Patricia, without taking his eyes off Sophia. "Almost everything, just missing..." She consulted her list. "The piano. Get the best one you can. Find," Maxwell instructed. "And Patricia, prepare the documents to establish a foundation, the Helena Martinez Foundation." "What will its purpose be?" Maxwell looked at his sleeping granddaughter, at the drawing of the boat with the angelic figures at the headlines Helena had so carefully preserved. To help other Helenas and Sophias, he replied, so no grandmother has to choose between her medicine and her granddaughters, so no child has to wait so long to find her family. In Sophia's drawing, the stars seemed to shine brighter, as if approving the plan. 6 months had passed since that fateful night on the yacht. The Solitude had been renamed the Fresh Start, its facilities completely transformed. The once austere and formal deck now boasted cheerful colors and carefully secured toys. In the center of the main salon, a grand piano held pride of place, its keys frequently touched by small, learning fingers. On this special Sunday morning, Maxwell helped Sophia get ready for an important event. She wore a light blue dress, specially chosen for the occasion, and her brown hair was arranged with matching ribbons. "Are you nervous, little one?" he asked, adjusting the bow in her hair. Sophia shook her head, smiling that smile that still made his heart ache with its resemblance to Anna's. "Grandma Helena always said being nervous is just your body telling you you're doing something important." Maxwell smiled, marveling once again at the wisdom his granddaughter had inherited from her 2 extraordinary guardians. "Your grandma was right, as always." The event was to be held at the old fishing harbor, now renovated thanks to investments from the newly established Helena Martinez Foundation. Where precarious shacks once stood, there was now a modern medical clinic, a daycare center, and a community center offering music and art classes. Patricia waited for them on the pier, holding a clipboard and checking last-minute details. "Judge Sullivan has arrived," she informed him, "and Dr. Evans is here too." "And Thomas?" Maxwell asked, though he already knew the answer. "Didn't confirm." Patricia hesitated, "but this morning's papers are quite positive about the foundation." Maxwell nodded. His nephew had taken over the company presidency as planned, and gradually the dust from the legal battle was settling. Money, Maxwell had discovered, had lost much of its power over him since Sophia entered his life. The inauguration ceremony for the Ana Martinez Community Center was scheduled to begin in an hour. Before that, however, there was something important Sophia wanted to do. "Can we go see them first?" she asked, holding her grandfather's hand. "Of course, my love." The small cemetery had been refurbished, its paths now well kept and lined with flowers. The double plot where Helena and Anna rested was covered in fresh flowers. The community members never let them run out. Sophia let go of Maxwell's hand and approached the headstones, kneeling carefully so as not to soil her dress. "Hi, Mommy. Hi, Grandma," she began, her voice soft and clear. "Today is an important day. Grandpa is going to help lots of people, just like you always did. There's even a music school, Mommy, just like you wanted." Maxwell watched the small scene. From a few steps away, silent tears streaming down his face, Sophia continued her animated report. "And guess what else? I can play 3 songs on the piano now. Grandpa said it's because I take after Mommy. He cries sometimes when I play, but he says it's a good cry, just like Grandma said it would be." She paused, running her little fingers over the names engraved on the stone. "Sometimes I get sad because you're not here, but then Grandpa hugs me and tells me stories about you, and it feels like you're close by. He said you turned into stars, the brightest ones in the sky." Maxwell approached, kneeling beside his granddaughter. Sophia immediately snuggled into his arms. "Thank you," he whispered towards the headstones, "for not giving up on me, for giving me this second chance." Sophia took something from a small pocket in her dress. It was the drawing of the boat with the angelic figures, now laminated and preserved. "I brought this for you to keep," she explained, placing the drawing among the flowers. "So you never forget we're all together on the big boat, even if some people can only visit in dreams." Maxwell kissed the top of her head, feeling his heart overflow with love. We need to go, little one. People are waiting. Sophia nodded, getting up. Before leaving, however, she touched the names on the headstone one last time. I love you. And Grandpa loves you too. He just took a little while to remember how. Hand in hand, grandfather and granddaughter walked back to the harbor, where dozens of people awaited the inauguration. The morning sun reflected on the calm waters, and a gentle breeze stirred the flags of the new community center. Grandpa, Sophia called, stopping for a moment. Yes, my love. Grandma Helena was right about you. How so? She always said your heart hadn't turned hard. It had just hidden itself away. That one day it would come out of hiding. She smiled, squeezing his hand. And it did. Maxwell scooped his granddaughter into his arms, hugging her tight. In the distance, the chapel bells began to ring, announcing the start of a new day, a new story. In the small cemetery, the breeze gently stirred the drawing among the flowers. On the paper, the big boat sailed under a starry sky, carrying not only the angels Sophia had drawn, but also the memories, the love, and the lessons of 3 generations of extraordinary women who had, each in her own way, saved Maxwell Anderson's soul.